Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today, we're thinking about the separation of powers and these scandalous revelations still coming out of the January 6 hearings. And there are a lot of them. As we've mentioned before, Donald Trump and his supporters attempted to subvert and end American democracy when they lost a free and fair election. This coup attempt culminated in the violence we all saw on January 6th. Now, in a country as big and as sprawling as the United States, it should be pretty difficult to overthrow, democracy. We just got a lot of people in a lot of different places. And part of the reason you have a tough go of trying to overthrow American democracy is because of the concept of separation of powers. Separation of powers is a pretty sophisticated concept. Look, you tell me that all of humanity is ruled by a series of thuggish god kings who just beat people up when they step out of line? Well, me knowing what I know about human beings, I don't find that unbelievable. But you tell me that human beings came together in the past and figured out that they got to divvy out the powers of the government so that no one person can become too powerful? That's nothing short of miraculous. And I remember being a kid and being floored with this idea of separation of powers and thinking that, wow, if you wanted to be like Caesar in America or you wanted to make yourself a king, you'd have a really hard time. You'd need a vast conspiracy of 50 senators and a couple hundred congressmen, not to mention thousands and thousands of local election workers. It'd be a tough thing. You could not overthrow American democracy without the coordination of at least two, maybe more branches of government. And that's kind of what we have here. The January 6th committee has presented pretty solid evidence that Republican members of Congress were coordinating with the president to forward false claims of election fraud in an attempt to, overturn the will of the people. Check this out. On December 27th, 2020, after Donald Trump had lost his election, there was a call between White House staff and the acting attorney general at the time, as well as other top DOJ officials. On that call, DOJ officials shot down claim after claim of voter fraud. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donoghue was on that call. Here he is at the January 6th committee talking under oath about his experience.
I felt in that conversation that it was incumbent on me to make it very clear to the president what our investigations had revealed, and that we had concluded, based on actual investigations, actual witness interviews, actual reviews of documents, that these allegations simply had no merit.
And here's the thing. The people who are best situated to review the evidence, to go and get the facts, they all end up saying that there is no merit to any of these allegations. But folks who believe there is fraud will not hear that fact, but it is true. No one who has looked at this has found any evidence of fraud. This is something that Donald Trump knew. But Donald Trump was working with Republican congresspeople who also had to know that there was no evidence of any fraud whatsoever. But this was part of a coordinated effort. Listen to Richie Donoghue tell it.
You also noted that Mr. Rosen said to Mr. Trump, quote, DOJ can't and won't snap its fingers and change the outcome of the election. How did the president respond to that, sir?
He responded very quickly and said, essentially, that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
So let's now put up the notes where you quote the president. As you're speaking to that, he said, the president said, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. So, Mr. Donoghue, that's a direct quote from President Trump, correct?
That's an exact quote from the president, yes.
And hey, look, we have covered this before, but it is just dang jarring, isn't it? The president's top cop, who just gets finished saying that there's no evidence of fraud and refuting it all, and the president's response is to just say that there is? Leave the rest up to him and the Republican congressman? Again, Richard Donoghue is under oath. He took contemporaneous notes at the time of this call. This is a guy who has spent his life in public service, his life in law enforcement, and is even a veteran of the military. Do people really want to believe Donald Trump? Someone who cheated on multiple wives and had to pay off a porn star? And if you still doubt there was a meeting at the White House between members of Congress and the president's staff to try to coordinate efforts to forward these lies, well, I mean, they were talking about this in public. Have a listen.
On December 21st, some Republican members of Congress met with President Trump in the White House to talk about overturning the 2020 election. Let's hear Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about how this meeting got set up.
I was the only new member at the meeting. I called President Trump on Saturday and said, we've got to have a meeting. There's many of us that feel like this election has been stolen.
So on the screen, you'll see that President Trump's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, tweeted about that meeting right after it happened. He said, quote, "Several members of Congress just finished a meeting in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump, preparing to fight back against mounting evidence of voter fraud. Stay tuned."
So what would these Republican Congresspeople do? Well, what do you think? Maybe stuff like this?
And so there's widespread evidence of fraud because people haven't done their jobs. Durham and Barr will deserve a big notation in history when it's written of the rise and fall of the United States if they don't clean up this mess, clean up the fraud, do your jobs, and save this little experiment in self-government.
Again, I join my colleagues in calling on Attorney General Barr to immediately let us know what he's doing.
We're already working on challenging the certified electors. And now what about the courts? How pathetic are the courts?
January 6th, I'm joining with the fighters in the Congress, and we are going to object to electors from states that didn't run clean elections. Democracy is left undefended if we accept the result of a stolen election without fighting with every bit of vigor we can muster.
The ultimate date of significance is January 6th. This is how the process works. The ultimate arbiter here, the ultimate check and balance is the United States Congress. And when something is done in an unconstitutional fashion, which happened in several of these states, we have a duty to step forward and have this debate and have this vote on the 6th of January.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
Again, you got a situation where members of two branches of the government are coordinating together to push bogus claims, to challenge legal electors, to throw out an election that they did not win, all culminating in violence in our nation's capital. Sounds bad, right? Sounds like maybe that should be against the law? And maybe it is. Maybe that's why a lot of these congressmen went to act for presidential pardons.
And was Representative Gates requesting a pardon?
Believe so. The pardon that he was requesting, was as broad as you could describe. From the beginning, I remember he's from the beginning of time up until today, for any and all things. He mentioned Nixon, and I said Nixon's pardon was never nearly that broad.
And are you aware of any members of Congress seeking pardons?
I guess Mr. Gates and Mr. Brooks, I know, have both advocated for there to be a blanket pardon for members involved in that meeting, and a handful of other members that weren't at the December 21st meeting as the preemptive pardons. Mr. Gates was personally pushing for a pardon, and he was doing so since early December. I'm not sure why. Mr. Gates had reached out to me to ask if he could have a meeting with Mr. Meadows about receiving a presidential pardon.
Did they all contact you?
Not all of them, but several of them did.
So you mentioned Mr. Gates, Mr. Brooks.
Mr. Biggs did. Mr. Jordan talked about congressional pardons, but he never asked me for one. It was more for an update on whether the White House is going to pardon members of Congress. Mr. Gomer asked for one as well. Mr. Perry asked for a pardon too. I'm sorry, I need to cut you off.
Mr. Perry, did he talk to you directly?
Yes, he did.
Did Marjorie Taylor Greene contact you?
No, she didn't contact me about it. I heard that she had asked White House Counsel's Office for a pardon from Mr. Philbin, but I didn't frequently communicate with Ms. Green.
Are you aware of any conversations or communications regarding the possibility of giving Congressman Matt Gaetz a pardon?
I know he had asked for it, but I don't know if he ever received one or what happened with it.
How do you know that Congressman Gaetz asked for a pardon?
He told me.
The only reason I know to ask for a pardon is because you think you've committed a crime.
So at this point, the writing is on the wall for all who care to read it. The United States came dangerously close to losing its democracy. Not because foreign invaders broke us, and not because of hippies or commies or lefties of any type, but for no other reason than that too many American citizens have abandoned their duty to deal with each other honestly and to stare facts squarely in the face, especially when they're scary. But that's it for me. You've been great. Hope to see you again next time, but until then,
I ain't got time to kiss you now. I'm busy with this mule.